First of all, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you coming to get information. I appreciate those that are online. I want to thank Mr. Feek. He oversees our broadcasting class, and he's here to make sure that this gets out to everyone. The format for tonight, I'll go through a brief presentation. Bryce Bronson and myself, he's our business manager. And if you have questions, please, we'll answer all questions at the end. I have a few questions that have been emailed in that we'll answer as well. If you want note cards, pens are in the back if you want to write them down so you don't forget. But again, we'll get right into it, but I appreciate you being here. Some of this information, if you've been following, will probably be a little redundant because you've probably seen it. We'll go through it quick, but if you need me to slow down, let me know. So first of all, why do we need a bond? And so if you look at our historical enrollment, I like to go back about 10 years, and we were just under 5,000 students, 4,928. 10 years ago. And if you look back to, this was actually last year, we're actually higher than this now, we're over 6,800 now, but 66, 61, 6,800 this year. So we're growing at a very substantial rate. Over the last 10 to 15 years, roughly 3% average growth. Some years, I think 5.7 was the highest that we had, a couple a little below 3%. And 3% doesn't sound like a lot until you do 3% on 6,500 students. And that's several hundred students a year. If you think of our elementary schools, some of them have 400 or 500 students in them, so that's almost an elementary school every year. And in those big years it is. And so as those students move through, we have issues that we need to address. Our projected enrollment. So again, so last year when we were talking about these numbers, our projected enrollment at 3% was 6763. Our actual, this was as of February, 6817. And so right in that 3 to 4% growth, which is the average. So if you project that out, another 5 to 10 years, you can see we hit that 7,000 mark very quickly, even at that 3%, and then up to 74, 7,500. Now that's the golden question though, is what's that growth going to do? Is it going to stay at that 3%? Is it going to jump up to that 5.7, or is it going to slow down? And that we don't know, so we have to go with the best information that we can. So the proposed projects. So you probably know this. One is to build a new middle school. Now our biggest concern right now is the enrollment at the high school. The enrollment at the high school was built for between 1,700 and 1,800 students. There's over 2,100 students there right now. We know that next year there will be 100 more students just by nature of a bigger freshman class going in, a smaller senior class leaving. And so we'll be at 2,200 students plus, then whatever growth, if it's 3%, whatever that is as well. So how do we plan on addressing that? Well, one, build a new middle school. We own property, the district owns property on 200 North and 4100 East. So it's about a mile south of South Fork Elementary and about a mile and a half east of Cottonwood Elementary, the new school that we built a couple of years ago. Estimated cost of this is about $63 million. So by building a new middle school, it will allow us to take all of those students at Rigby Middle School, take them out of that building, put them there, vacate the existing Rigby Middle School building, and in essence, expand our high school campus. Be able to take over that space so we have room now for those 2,200 plus students. But rather than just saying, okay, we have more classrooms now, we want to make sure we're maximizing that space, that we're giving our students every opportunity possible to be successful when they leave our campuses. And so in so doing, we want to remodel some of that school to create a career technical education center. What does that mean? Well, we have a great career technical education program now. We have a great ag program, business program, construction program, robotics program, but we're running out of space. Plus, we would like to expand and offer new programs as well to help our students when they leave high school to, one, either be better prepared for college or better prepared for the workforce. And this would accomplish both of those. So we would take this building and remodel parts of that to be able to really create a learning atmosphere that prepares students for the next stage in their life, whatever that is. And this would cost estimated $5 million. And then currently at Rigby Middle School, we've got just under 1,000 students, and at Farnsworth Middle School, we've got about 600 students, 620, 630 students. So we would propose adding classrooms to Farnsworth Middle School to be able to, one, balance those numbers, two, Farnsworth doesn't have some things that Rigby Middle does and a new middle school does, like some of those CTE classes. They don't have a family consumer science room, a place for their ag classroom and things like that. So to be able to be purposeful in that space to, again, be able to provide those opportunities for students. And then create, again, more space so we have room to expand. And that's estimated cost of $7 million. So what I just talked about, that will be one question on the bond. When you go to the polls, there's going to be two questions. That will be one of them, those projects for $75 million. There will be a second question for $5 million, and that's to add a gymnasium at Roberts Elementary School. Currently, Roberts is the only school in the district without a gymnasium. They have a, you can see here, this is their lunchroom, multi-purpose room, PE room, gym room, and this was at the Christmas program this year, and I wish we had a picture of the halls because there were parents lined up all through the halls. So for that school, for that community, we feel that that would be a benefit academically, and also again for the community. Right now, anybody in Roberts that wants to participate in youth sports or activities, they have to travel here, and honestly, some just don't do that. And so we feel like it would be a benefit for the community as well as for the school as well. And that's an estimated cost of $5 million. The picture here, this is a picture of Midway Elementary. If you remember in the 2018 when we built Cottonwood, we added a gym at Midway and at Harwood. And so it would be similar to that. So that's the projects. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bryce, and he's going to talk about the financial impacts of that. So this, again, this is just those projects. Again, the $75 million and the $5 million. I think we covered that.
Right. There we go. So when you get your ballot, it'll say the cost impact for the $75 million bond is $156 per 100,000, and the Roberts is $10 per 100,000. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that actually works out. So this graph, it's kind of small for those of you who can't see it. The bottom is years, and the vertical axis is tax revenue per $1 million. Now each one of these colors represents a series of bonds. The yellow, blue, and gray represent the Rigby High School bond. That Rigby High School bond was broken out into 4 series, 4 different bonds, as you'll see noted on your tax statement. We did that to take advantage of some federal programs, some that paid our interest on that series of bonds, but they also had maximum amounts that we could put into that. So that's why it was broken out into 4 series. One of those series is already paid off, and then as you can see, one will drop off in 25, 27, and by 2029, the high school will be paid off. The red is actually our Cottonwood bond, our newest bond, which will be paid off in 2037. Now, this green would be the proposed, actually, it's the whole $80 million, both bond questions. Let's do a little history of the bond levy rate that we've had in the school district. When the high school was finished, the school board got together to come up with a philosophy of how they were going to levy taxes. And they came out with a philosophy of a level levy rate. And they decided on $427 per 100,000 at that time would cover all their bond obligations. And what they saw coming forward is growth. And they said if we kept that rate steady and as growth grew, that amount that would come in with that rate would increase and we'd be able to pay for our future capital needs with that growth that came with that growth. And so we did that with the Cottonwood bond, is keeping that level levy rate. We were able to generate more revenue coming into the district by keeping that level rate, just by having more people pay that. And we were able to pay the Cottonwood bond. Now that kind of becomes problematic as we've seen the last couple of years with assessed home values rising dramatically. This last year, they increased 44%, as I'm sure everyone knows here. So it becomes problematic because keeping a level levy rate and those home values going up so much, the district couldn't bring in that much tax revenue. So last summer, we've had many meetings with the school board, and they come up with a new philosophy of a level levy amount. And that's what this red line represents. They decided they needed $7.5 million to pay for our current bond obligations. And they would keep that steady going forward. Now, that's good because as growth happens and more people move into our school district, more people will put into that $7.5 million, which could potentially mean that your tax amount would go down a little bit. But the problem is there's no future growth built into this. So that's the negative of that. But right now, the $7.5 million. So this current year of 2023, as you can see, we have these bonds and then there's this empty space here. Currently we paid, well, last September we paid off our South Fork bond that was done in 2007. So that freed up some space, which allows us to fit in this proposed bond in, wrap around the old bonds and be able to be under that $7.5 million, which when the district says that the new bond would not raise your taxes, currently this is what we are already collecting, and as you can see, that new bond fits right under that $7.5 million. And how we can do that is smaller payments up here at the beginning, and then as you can see, the full amount goes to the bonds at the end. So this green amount represents $156 plus that $10 average throughout that 20 years. So that's, when you see it on the bond, it's going to say $156 and $10 per 100,000. But what it's saying is that's just the average over 20 years.
I think one also thing, when we changed that, going from the rate to the amount, it actually lowered the rate
Correct.
from $4.27 to $3.27, is that right?
That's correct.
And so it actually lowered the rate. Now, because your home values were much higher, it may not have lowered what you actually pay, but that rate now, based on this 7.5, is, as of now, $327 per $1,000, if that makes sense. And so going forward, as Bryce said, more people paying into that, it lowers what each individual could pay. Does that make sense? That one's always complicated. But the difference is now that we're paying a level amount rather than a rate, as your home values increase, the amount you pay doesn't increase because it's based on that amount. So, questions? Yes?
But then if we have another bond in 3 or 4 years, it would be over that, correct?
So if we, yes, so if we had to have another bond, whenever that would be, that is the con of this philosophy, because if you were still doing it on a rate, this line would be going up what the district's collecting, but it's not. We're collecting what we need. Now, if and when we need another bond, it would be because we have growth, and so we'd have more people paying into that. And so potentially that amount you're paying may not go up, but you're right. Yeah. Yes?
And is it true there's no bonding capacity? So you could ask for another 10 million, 100 million, whatever it is going forward. There's not a max.
So there is a max as far as what we can ask for. The district can have indebtedness up to 5% of the total market value of the whole district. So if we take every house, farm, business, that market value, and then you can have indebtedness 5% of that, if that makes sense. And so a year ago, that number was about 100 million. Now, because of the recent assessments going way up, that number's up now. So yes, we could ask for more based on that, but that would increase taxes as well. So that number now is probably closer to 100.
It's 130. Just over
130 million now is what our total cap we could have. And that would include our existing debt plus, does that make sense?
And that number changes every year.
Right.
With more assessed values, more market value, that will go up. And as we pay down other bonds, that gives us more capacity in there as the bonds go down.
So then if value's depressed, then you're upside down?
So if value's depressed, we would still ask the 7.5 million, so that amount you pay could
Yeah,
go up.
yeah. So that's the gamble too. Now, I don't know when the last time your house assessment went down, but if it did, then yes, you'd be paying more than that.
2009?
What's that?
I remember 2009.
Yeah, yeah, and so that would be the risk that you take, yeah.
So,
I mean,
and that was 1 year for,
By a really high market?
so, yeah, explain that.
so that's okay. I was just going to say, for that 1 year, housing, the market went down 2% in our county, and then the next year jumped up 6%. So,
So wouldn't it behoove you to keep a little bit of slush?
So-
Rather than get into debt all the way up to the max?
Well, we won't be all the way up to the max.
Stay farther away from the max as possible?
And we are. That's one reason that, because a lot of people said, why don't we do a high school? That's why. A high school now is 120 million. Max is 130 that we could get. We're asking for 80. And so we are staying away from that as much as possible. So yes.
and there's limits also. We can only collect 21 months worth of bond payments in our savings account. So you really, that's by,
What is that rule?
so
That's law.
that's law.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so districts won't hold a lot of money.
Yeah.
Won't tax and hold that money.
And that's what we run up against when those assessed values went way up, and the district's collecting a lot more money now because values are up. We can only collect 21 months worth, and so that's what, when we lowered that to the 327, that was one reason why. So, yes.
But when you over collected, you were able to use that money to pay down
Right.
you put it towards bonds. and
Right, that's the only thing you can do with that money is pay it towards indebtedness. So the district refunded, kind of like a refinance, bonds, which saved millions of dollars because you're paying them off early, or at least paying the interest off early. So, yes.
Yeah, has the county budget gone up over since, say, 2015?
The county or the district?
The county, this county budget,
Has it gone up?
county,
To be honest, I'm not real familiar with Jefferson County budget. I can tell you the district budget.
the district budget, okay, has
Yeah.
the district budget going up?
Yes.
How much?
That'd probably be Bryce would be able to answer it better than me.
So I started at the district in 2016. Our general fund budget was just over 30 million, and now it's $43 million. We get funded by basically classroom units. They're called support units, but it's basically classrooms. The more classrooms we have of students, the more that we get funded.
Yeah, and that's the biggest item on the county's tax, on the different items for the county, right?
Right. So I think we're talking two different things. Our
Right.
budget or our tax, what we're collecting for taxes?
It's the biggest tax item is the school.
So yeah, that's just the bonds then.
Right, yeah, that's our bonds, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah. And the biggest item in that school district was the high school being built. Well, right?
Yes, yeah, that was built for 37 million, I
What
believe,
year was that?
2000
Well, the election was 2009, finished 2013.
is when the high school was
Okay, how
finished.
much did they borrow for that?
Was it,
Total was 45 million for that one.
45 million.
It was built for less.
yeah, it was built for 37.
I was just comparing, Madison High School down in Idaho Falls was built for about 65 million.
Yeah, about the same time
It was a
period.
Cadillac school.
Yeah, and it was about the same time period as this. We built this for like 20 million less than
And
theirs.
you guys are asking for 80 million? That's going to be a real Cadillac middle school.
No, prices have gone up drastically since then.
The thing is, that even if prices have gone up, I mean, my taxes since 2015 have gone up 139%.
Yeah, I don't doubt that.
And I can't see where the county budget has gone up 139%.
Yeah.
Something is real unbalanced here.
Well, part of that was because when it was based on your assessed value, as your assessed value went up,
Well, yeah, but the
Right.
levy rate's supposed to take care of that and keep it down, what, to?
and that's what the board has done now,
10%
exactly.
a year?
Yeah, exactly, that's what the board has done now, yeah.
It hasn't done that. It's been well over 10% increase a year, well over. It's on
Yeah,
average
and
18%.
there's some of that, we can't control what your property's assessed at. That's outside of our,
Yeah,
our
but the levy
hands.
rate's supposed to keep that somewhat.
And exactly, and that's, in September, that's exactly what the district did. They lowered that levy rate from $4.24 at the time to $3.27.
Yeah, so I still want to see how when you add $80 million to the total amount that we owe, that it's not going to increase the taxes a lot.
So the way that we do that is here, we paid off a bond here in September, and then the way that you structure this is you're paying smaller payments here that take the place of the one that we paid off, And then as others are paid off, it takes that capacity there, so it keeps that level.
Then how come my taxes are going up 139%?
So again, when that was based on your assessed value, and it was a rate, as that value went up, taxes went up. That's not the case now.
Should have evened that out.
No, because at that point, the levy was a percentage
You
of...
guys are collecting a whole bunch of excess money.
Exactly, at that point we were. That's why the board went back, and so that's when we refunded bonds, and then that's when we went and changed the philosophy to do it that way. Exactly. So that's exactly in September, that's what the board was addressing. Because when property values were going up, you know, single digits percentage a year, that worked fine. But when it jumped to 30, 40%, it didn't. And so that's when the board addressed that.
I see
Yes.
that there's a missing bond payment, I guess, in this year. What happens,
This one?
yeah, right there.
So-
What happens if the bond does not go through with that money that was collected?
So that's a good question. So let's say the bond doesn't pass. So within about 2 years, this rate would drop. Does that make sense? And so at that rate,
For it to come down?
what's that?
It'll take 2 years for it to come down? No, you're going to be collecting excess money for
So
4 years?
you could probably explain that better.
So really, we can collect up to 21 months worth of bond payments. We always want to have a cushion in case there is a downturn, or when we do a new bond, sometimes we don't get funded. The bond equalization, it's a program, we don't get that till the next year. So there's usually a year that we really have to eat a lot of money, so we have to have a little bit of cushion. So yes, usually it takes a year or two before it goes down.
Well, it looks like a lot bigger cushion than you're talking about, because the population has gone up. I don't know what percentage of the population has gone up. The assessed value has certainly gone up, so you're getting a lot more from that. And you're saying that your cushion is staying the same?
No, our cushion, so 2 years ago, when we made our bond payment in September, it took us down to $65,000, which is basically zero in this amount. Last year, we had about, at the end, we had about $3 million in June, but we have a $6 million payment in September. And so we had another, in July, we had a large collection, but really our bond amount has not been over a couple $1 million. And then when it was, we refunded or refinanced bonds.
Yes.
I have two questions for you. In your little brochure here, it says, okay, that this levy amount we're paying in 2023 would be $327 per 100,000 of homes value.
Correct.
That 327 is only the school bonds,
Correct. Well,
not
of all,
anything else that we're paying tax-wise.
so it's all of our school bonds. But yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the county, what they're collecting, and you're right.
So what were we paying? Take what we're not, or what we are paying now without this bond, what's the rate? You said 4.
It's the same. So we have that 327 has got this new bond built into it right now.
Right.
Right, and since September, it dropped in September from 424 to 327. So if this doesn't pass, you're right, that will drop again.
Okay, then the next question is, and I'll have to think about what you just said, but if you take that graph right there, and you go back to your projected growth at 3%, apply it to that graph, and we're only looking at maybe 5 years before we're going to have another bond.
Right, and that's the question, so, and that's the crystal ball, right? But at 3%, then we have some numbers we can work with. So at the high school, 7 to 10 years is what we figure before we would need to do something. Now, there is a chance, depending on where that growth comes, that we could be looking at an elementary sooner than that, which you would need to add into there. But again, that's depends on where that growth comes. And it's interesting because each year it's a little bit different. Sometimes we get more at the high school, middle school level. Sometimes it's all at the elementary. Sometimes it's scattered.
But if you go back to that projected growth, you're at, what, yeah, right, 46? You go back-
We're about 6,800 students right now. Oh, let's see.
Okay, so you're 60, well,
Right here is what we're currently, give or take, but yeah, it changes daily.
so in 9 years, at a 3% growth, you're going to be 74. So that's an increase of, what, 14%?
I don't know, Bryce is the, He's a math guy.
Pretty close.
So at what point in that growth there?
Right.
Are we going to have a new bond, a new school?
Right, and again, that depends on where that growth is. So if it's all at the upper grades, it would be sooner. If it's at the lower grades, then it would be further out before those kids get to high school. So, but if there's a chance that we would need an elementary before then as well. And so, I mean, that's all crystal ball, but yeah,
Okay, so you're out 10 years here.
Right.
And you're saying 7438, but your bond is, how many years was the bond?
it's 20 years.
20 years, so
Yeah.
we're going to have to do something.
Before the bond's paid off, I would speculate, yes, we'll have to do something, by all means.
So can the projected numbers be changed, like in that graph, like how it's saying that we're gonna be paying a lot on this bond if it passes? Can we pay less if we need another bond to make up
Well,
for it?
not necessarily, but because, I mean, that's how it will be structured. But you're going to have more people paying into that. Values are going to be different. So while this number may go up, the actual amount you pay may not, because you're going to have more people paying that, if that makes sense.
But you have 2 more bonds by then.
Right.
If I'm just looking at, there's 4, then there's 3, then there's
Right.
back to 4.
Because
Yeah, right. I mean, the truth is, if the community continues to grow, we are obligated to provide schools for them.
Raising his hand in the hat.
Yes. Thank you for being patient, too.
You're fine. So for instance, a sheet of ply was $15 now. 2 years ago, it was $65. Okay? And I'm a mason contractor, so I'm trying to calculate how that auditorium in Roberts is $5 million when I could look at this high school and see that our block on the inside are $11 a block because there's special curb cut. I mean, there's just ways I can see hundreds of thousands and millions cut down and still build a beautiful school. You don't need the top dollar stuff. I'm wondering if you're gonna gold plate this new auditorium.
No.
Because I, you know.
So
That's what I'm talking about.
so let me,
$80 million is a substantial increase over
I agree.
$45 million.
I agree.
High school would.
Believe me, I agree, but it's also been
And I don't think
15 years.
inflation is that much since
Inflation,
2011.
sorry, I know the inflation numbers.
Oh, yeah, are we,
Give me a second.
well, I'm sorry.
So inflation rates on large construction projects like a school, in fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks specifically new school construction. It's increasing at twice the rate of normal inflation, twice the rate.
Which is what?
About, normal inflation is usually 2 to 3%.
Yeah.
And right now, the cost of new school construction is increasing. It's doubling every 16 years, where normal inflation, prices double about every 30 years. It just costs more. It's not that it's more gold plated or
We're
anything
talking
like that.
about, you
It
said
just
6 to
costs more
8%?
than
Yeah, my materials for brick and block have gone up 20% in 2 years.
So it's-
At least 20.
It's not Cadillac, it's just the way it is. And it's across the country, it's not just here.
It's supply and demand.
It's facts, it's actual Bureau of Labor Statistics, producer price indexes for new school construction. I can show it to you.
Thank you.
Are there bids?
Yeah, so the process, so that's a good, and it's an interesting process. So you hire you put out request for qualifications for a contractor and also for an architect. And so they kind of come and give you their presentation based on previous work, based on recommendations, based on prices, things like that. You select one. From there, you get your design and everything, but every aspect of that project goes out to bid, and by law, we have to take the lowest bid, unless there's some reason that, you know, they're not licensed or something like that. And so every subcontractor goes out for bid. It's not like we just say, okay, have at it. And we're at the bid openings. It's a pretty interesting process, really. And so, yeah, every aspect of it, and we couldn't even say, well, we like this contractor a little better, even though they're more expensive. We can't do that. We have to go with the lowest bid.
So let's just say that the bond passes and down the road the school's finished. Let's say it comes in under value like the high school did or
Right.
under cost. Would you just use that money to pay off other bonds more quickly or?
So good question. So there's two things we could do. Let's say that we pass both bonds, or let's say we pass the big one at 75 million and it comes in at 70 million. So we have $5 million left. There's two things we could do. We could go back to voters and say we have $5 million, can we reallocate this for a different project? Or we could just put it into that bond fund to pay that down. But those are the only two things. We couldn't say, oh, well, we'd like to do something over here, we'd like to do, no. That's the only things that we can do. So, good question, thank you.
Also, with this bond, or whenever schools pass bonds, it's not just for the building, like the desk, the computer, the chemistry
Right.
labs, the art, the PE equipment, lockers,
Right.
all
The landscaping, the pavement, everything.
All of that is included in that amount.
Right.
And so if you look at just what it is to just build a building, well, yeah, that's going to be less than what the bond is, but this includes every single piece of material for students to show up and get an education.
Right. Yes.
How many students is the new middle school being built for?
Good question. So that's always an interesting question because it depends on how many students you're going to cram in a classroom. But the plan would be around 1,100, 1,100 to 1,200.
And is that 1,000 right now?
It's about 960 right now.
So why
But
not
again,
bigger?
well, that's a good question. But again, rather than go to another 1,600 student middle school, that's why we would add on Farnsworth as well, so we could have two middle schools relatively the same size. Because you get much more than 1,000 middle school students in one building, and it's pretty chaotic. So you could just build bigger, but we thought it made more sense to have two middle schools.
You made a really good comment about it also includes the furnishings and everything. I have a statement from Hummel Construction Architects that built Thunder Ridge. The cost of the building itself was $4,100,000.
I saw that. That's absolutely false.
Are you sure?
I'm positive, 100% positive.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a misprint or something, because I saw somebody post that on Facebook, and it's just false. I mean, I talked to their superintendent, yeah.
How do you plan to handle the growth if this does not pass?
Good question. And honestly, that's a question, that'll be a community conversation we have to have. So we figure that at this point we have, let's say it passes in March, or tomorrow, we would start building, by the time design and everything, July, you'd be 2 years out. So 2 years before we get any relief. So if it doesn't pass, we feel like we can manage for 2 years. And so during that time, we would have to figure those things out. Do we go back and look at another plan for a bond? Do we look at split sessions? Do we look at, and those are conversations you would have to have. Yeah, right here and then back here.
How much does it cost each time you guys do a bond question? I know it comes from the county, I was just wondering how much.
We pay a bond attorney to write it to make sure it's all legal.
For us, it's not much. It's the elections committee, and I'm not sure how much that is.
Yeah, as far as for the county itself running it, I don't know, I'd have to ask them. But yeah, for us ourselves, it's very minimal.
Right, but we're
Yeah.
asked to do this question because
Right.
we haven't changed much from last year, and if we're just going to continue doing this, it
Right.
doesn't make sense if we don't change something.
Yeah. So, yeah, you were next too.
Have you investigated other ways to raise capital other than debt?
So really, legally, there's only a couple ways you can do it. One is bond, two is donation. Like, that's it. And we haven't had people lined up to donate that much money. And so, I mean, I would love if there was another way. I would love it. And I know there's been talk about like impact fees and things like that. Legally, schools can't collect those. But I mean, if there's a change in the legislation or another way to do it, I would love to not have to go and do this every time we have to bill.
Maybe people would be more encouraged to donate if the classes were more crowded.
Yeah, maybe. But $80 million is a lot to donate. Yes.
It seems to me, and I came prepared with the statement, but I'll just kind of go over here.
Yeah.
That you guys have a problem, and it started years and years ago. Every day I drive past Farnsworth and Jefferson, I see these glass pyramids out there. Those run between $20,000 and $30,000 each. They don't accomplish what they were meant to do. It was somebody's monument to either the architect or the school board or school board members.
No.
Now I drive past the high school, and it's called the Wedge, I guess, that upper wedge on top of the building there, that serves no purpose.
That rake alone is millions.
Well, millions, again, one thing you got to keep in mind, and I can't speak to, I don't know, that's before my time, so.
We need all these schools,
Right.
I'm all for that. All I'm saying is, can't we cut
Right.
down some costs?
So a couple of
That's what
things.
this gentleman's saying, but we're borrowing money.
So a couple of things. One, that the pyramid, that was before my time. I can't really speak to that. High school, I was in the community then. I could talk that. But I could tell you, I have numbers on the high school. And as far as the wedge and all that, I don't know. But I could tell you that that high school was built for a fraction of what any other school was built for at the time. A fraction of
That
that.
doesn't matter, we're still borrowing for it.
Right, yeah, and I don't know what that
All I'm
increase is,
saying
but,
But what we're saying is, you have a public perception that the school board is not building for the students, and they don't give a rat's tail about my money. And
Yeah.
what I think you guys need to do, and you know what? You're changing my mind about a lot of things, but the perception out there is either somebody on the school board, or you, or the architect's going to build these big monuments to glorify them that they can look at for the years coming. And we as the public don't want that.
so the last building we built was Cottonwood Elementary. Have you been there? What's your perception of that?
Well, I drive school bus, so.
Yeah.
So do I.
So what's your perception of that building?
It looks like it was built in 1970.
Yeah. And it's the same as South Fork. It's the same floor plan. We reused that, yeah.
And, I mean, we kind of look at our architecture for the high school, for example, and then we go down and visit family in Utah, there's Taj Mahals in Utah.
Yeah.
And we don't care
But
about
that
that.
still doesn't mean we rack up our debt, that's the thing.
I'm saying there's a balance.
Yeah,
right?
there is.
There's a balance.
I'm not saying, let's do gray cinder block and paint it white, but I'm saying they've got split face every other block. I'm just saying, there is things that you could make that building beautiful and cut down a 20% right off, easy.
So that's the public perception that I
Yeah.
think you guys need to address. And
Right.
I haven't seen it. This is helping, but. for the-
So I could tell you, last year when we did it, we put out a basic floor plan, and we had, not a lot of people, but some people say, that's going to cost so much more money because there were, the wings came off at an angle. And so we went back to the contractor, said, and they ran numbers, they said, that is so negligible. It's not. He said, it used to be that way. He says, now we can set our lasers and we do it. It's no more labor, it's no more. But I said, that's an issue for us because that's a perception. So what do? They straighten those up for us. And so
The radius block wall.
that one's not, I mean, I can't speak to that. That's not what we're building, and I wasn't even here then, so, yeah. But we listened and we went back to that.
So then all I'm saying is that needs to
Yeah.
be put out to the public in a better manner.
Yeah.
So we don't feel that you're not spending our
Yeah.
money.
No, I appreciate that, yeah.
And I see what you're saying. I also believe, though, that we're on the, like, the superintendent that was here that built the high school, he's been, he's not here anymore. And we had another one in between, and then we have Mr. Martin. And so I think some of those decisions were made by previous
Oh, absolutely.
people. And so I think it's fair to give our superintendent now and our school board now a chance, they fixed a lot of things in the schools and they built good schools and, I'm on my fourth kid over at the high school and they feel like they're getting a good education over there, the way it's laid out.
No question about what you're saying.
Yeah,
My point is that there's a general perception.
yeah.
And that needs to be addressed.
That's fair. Thank you. Right there, and then,
In addition to the construction costs, do you have a budget for what it's going to cost the staff in the school?
yeah, so any
What's that gonna be?
So any staffing costs, bond can't pay for staffing costs, as you're probably aware. Staffing costs is based on how many kids we have. So as we grow, we get more money from the state for staffing costs. And so regardless whether we have students in 2 schools, 3 schools, we get the funding, whether we have a lot of students at this school or a lot of students at 2 separate schools, funding for teachers and things, that it's going to be the same. Now there is some additional funding for custodians, administration and stuff. But yeah, that is taken into consideration. And yeah, we're not going to build a building and not be able to run it, of course.
But that would be a separate bond.
No, a bond can't be used for that. So yeah, no, it wouldn't.
Bonds can only be for buildings.
For capital, yeah.
Not for salaries.
Yeah. Yes, you had a call.
So, with the Career Technical Center, are there gonna be, like, how is that gonna work with, creating more space, I guess?
Yeah.
Because, like, not every student's gonna wanna take those
Right.
classes, so are there gonna be more regular classes in that building?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So right now, we have students going to 17 different locations, other than just the high school buildings. So the plan would be to consolidate that, plus have some additional space. But it doesn't make sense for a student to go to the CTE Center, take a welding class, and then back to take an English class, and so we do plan on having traditional classes there as well. So while you're there, you could take a math class, spend half your day there, half in the regular high school. Now, the long-term vision would be for somebody that knows that I want to go into medicine. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to take my nursing classes, my medical terminology. I'm also going to take my English class, but that English class will be slanted towards medicine as well. So rather than reading certain novels, we'll read medical journals, meet those same standards. That's the long-term vision for that. So, good question. Yes?
And you're also going to have more qualified teachers for those college-type classes. So is that covered by the state and stuff as well?
Yeah, and we already have that. Like we already offer college credits for our CTE classes. And so, but yeah, the more we have, the more we'll have to find. CTE in some ways is a little bit easier to find teachers because the path to certification is easier. If I've worked in the field, there's ways to get certified to teach as well. And there's some additional funding there too. But yeah, finding teachers at all right now is a challenge, but that will be a challenge, but it's not a different challenge than we already face because we already have those classes. But yes?
What capacity is the school at right now?
At the high school?
Yeah.
It's just over 2,100 students,
And what's its capacity?
about 1,750.
So it's over,
Well over capacity. We have 17 modular units that we're using right now.
okay.
Yeah.
What happens if you just add one modular unit?
Well, one, that's a sunken cost because they don't last. Two, you can't find them right now. And they're $100,000, $125,000 a piece. So, I mean, if you can find them, I don't know if the community's in big support of putting more out there, to be honest.
You got a lot of room out there.
Oh, there's room, yeah. Yeah.
The safety of the students is jeopardized.
Right.
It's reverse evolution.
Yeah. And I mean, building a building, we're building a building for, 80 to 100 years. A modular unit, after 10 years, they're beat up. So, I mean, there's a lot of sunken cost, and there's no value to them after.
School population can also fluctuate.
It can, yeah, it can. I mean, and that's the crystal ball part. And that's why we didn't build when that met capacity, because you can't build for what you think you're going to get. You got to build for what you have, and you want to build a little bit of cushion in. But we can't say, okay, we know we're going to get another 1,000 students there, so let's build 1,000. No, that's just not. We can't do that.
Is the middle school at the same capacity, or?
No, the middle school, we've had 1,500, 1,600 in the middle school, but at that time they were using all those modulars. But right now it's close to capacity. We could probably put 1,000, maybe 1,100 in there, and it's about 960. So, yeah.
Well, what about Farnsworth's capacity?
So Farnsworth capacity is 700, 750. We're at 650, so there's a little bit more. And then if we were to add on to there, that would create some as well, and we could move those boundaries to balance those out. Okay, I got a couple questions here. Some of them we may have already addressed, but does the school district own the land where the middle school will be built? Yes, it does. It's on, I think I mentioned it, but 200 north and 4100 east. Can bond funds be used to pay for employee salaries? No. Does the district receive additional funding for CTE courses? Yes, they do, and there's also a lot of grants available for those as well. Is the current bond tax included in the $7.5 million you collect? Yes, it is. And then another one just about the building, the conservative building, so we've talked about that in the process there. I think that's all. Oh, how many students will fit in the proposed middle school? So 1,100, 1,200. And again, that's always a tricky question because it depends on I mean, you could physically fit more than that in there, but at some point. I also had an email, let me look at that too. I think we might have all of these. Will the additional bond or levy be proposed to operate it? We talked about that one. When will our tax rate go down? I guess when our growth stops, really. And I mean, if growth continues, we got to continue to build buildings, unless something changes at the state level on how that's funded. I mean, that's the reality of it. So, are there any questions that have come online, Michael? No, okay, go
I'm
ahead.
sure realize you guys have a tough situation because we have to have more schools. We have to have more room. I mean, I support this. I don't like to go into more debt than we need to or spend more than we need to is the only red flag I'm seeing. But I'm seeing where you guys are, you got your backs up against the wall. We're probably one of the fastest growing cities in the country per capita. I mean, who wouldn't want to live here?
Right.
Just ask me. It's
Oh, yeah.
crazy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a reason people are moving here, yeah. That's because of great schools. Yes, back here.
As far as out-of-county resident children, is that a significant percentage of what's here?
No, it's less, we pulled that 3%, less than 3%, and most of those came in the immersion programs when we were starting those because we needed those people to make those viable. Now, actually, we turn people away because we have enough. But no, and for the last 2 years, we haven't accepted out of, I shouldn't say that. We have accepted some, but only, like if we hire an employee, we allow their student to come here if they live outside, but other than that, we haven't accepted any.
Not like 500 or 600
Oh,
in the
no.
whole district?
No, I think it was less than 100, if I remember right, yeah. And that's sprinkled across 12 grade levels, so.
As far as transportation goes, bus routes and stuff, I don't know, obviously all the buildings are already built, but it seems like everything is just getting really sprawled out and timelines from elementaries to high school.
Yeah.
I don't really see it all the time, but it seems like there's a bus that passes our house maybe like 3 to 5 times a day. And I don't know if it's the same bus.
It could be because in some areas they'll pick up the elementary, come back for secondary, and then in the afternoons, elementary, we take them home and come back. So yeah, that very well could be. And then we don't have midday kindergarten busing anymore, but we do have our early childhood center that's on a different schedule. That's preschool, and we do bus some of those kids. So it is, potentially you could see that, yeah.
So with, older kids having to come to the high school, are they able to ride the same bus being so far away and how bad traffic is with scheduling and stuff? Is the issue with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're doing it now. I honestly think that this will help with traffic some because you're pulling 1,000 kids from that location and keeping them on that side so you're not having to bus them across. But yeah, good question. And that's always a challenge, like transportation drives so much, yeah.
Our economy is very fragile right now. We just saw 2 major banks go belly up. So if things continue, and they very easily could, and let's say that foreclosures go into houses, and all Jefferson County has many, many, many homes that are all, So if they happen to lose their homes, and you still are guaranteed the money because the county's going to go in and figure out how to get you your money, it's going to make taxes go higher. I don't care how.
So yeah, and that's exactly what I said. If values go way down and people quit moving in, yeah, I mean that's the reality of it. I wish I could sugarcoat it. But
scenario, because this is a tough time to be spending money. We don't know where this is going to go. But to me, the CTAE program is important. You could build it onto the current middle school, and you could still build onto the other middle school, and you could absorb quite a few students that way. And probably get us through until the point that we need to build another high school. So what do you prefer, a middle school or a high school?
At this point, a middle school. And I'll tell you a couple reasons why. One goes back to that question. the busing question. So currently, obviously, we have a high school and 2 middle schools on this side. If we were to build a high school over on that property, which would be make the most sense, now you're busing kids either next to the other high school from that side or past the other high school to there. So the long-term vision of the board is, let's say in whenever that time is, 10, 12 years, whenever it is we need a high school, we already have a middle school there, then we have a high school there, we have a natural split of the district, and we don't have to bus back and forth and across. And so, yeah, at this point, I mean, and the board spent, I mean, days and days, we had work sessions talking about this and running numbers, and so it's not something that was just an idea that they had, and a new high school was on the table. I mean, that was part of the discussion, and cost was part of that. We knew we couldn't do that without raising taxes, but also was the geographic, also was the fact that a couple other things. One, if you're a business owner in town, how many times do you get hit up by the high school clubs, teams to help donate? We're going to double that amount with 2 high schools. And so we have this, you know, really a small town with a lot of people. And so that's part of it as well, you know, in hopes that at some point, some of that commercial catches up with it. So there's a lot that went into it, a lot of discussion, a lot of looking at those numbers. And so, I mean, that is something that was on the table to do those things. So it's not.
It seems awfully risky.
Yeah, with what he's saying is the interest rate is going up double. The national debt, the federal government, they don't have a plan like you do to pay back any money.
Mm-hmm.
So our dollar's getting less and less and less by the month.
No, I mean, those are all realities, I understand it, but.
No, do you guys keep that in?
But the reality too is we got to have a place for kids, so I mean, it's a.
I know.
Yeah,
That's where,
yeah, yes.
What about more, you know, a more hybrid kind of, as the workforce has changed to a more hybrid model?
Mhm.
It's been some give and take and some growing pains, but it's, at least in my industry, I've seen, you know, an uptick in efficiency because a hybrid model tends to allow better utility of time, better usage of time. And I'm wondering if that can't be done at the high school level as well.
Mhm. So online classes, is that what you're saying?
Online
Something like that?
classes, independent study, charter.
Yeah. So we do that. We have online classes. We learned during COVID, some kids work under that and some just don't. And so those that do, they have that option now. And we have an online high school. Do you know how many?
but they're finding so many social things from COVID coming back and bite them by not having
Working from home, going to
internet
school from home,
access.
it's two totally different
Right,
things.
yeah, adults versus kids or,
Who
yeah.
are, you know, going through the process of getting older.
Yeah.
I mean, we experienced it through COVID, so to go to all online or have online, that option is available, but
Right, yeah. I think we have one online, then I'll get back to you, Debbie.
Yeah. So a couple with that in the classroom, I can say I have seen kids that went online that did struggle and needed to be in the classroom.
Yeah.
And there were kids that did flourish online. It was great. But to say half of you have to go online would be a really hard decision to do.
Yeah.
Okay, then there are a couple questions online. Will this new bond bring us to the maximum amount that we can borrow? When will we be able to pass another bond, and how much would that be? And then what population growth rate are you assuming for the bond to not increase taxes?
Okay, so repeat the first one again.
Yep. Will this new bond bring us to the maximum amount that we can borrow?
So the maximum borrow was 130 million, and this will be 80 million. So 130 million in addition to what we already have, and this is 80, so it would leave us 50 million.
How much do we currently have?
Just about 40 million still outstanding.
It'll be 40 million plus the 80 million.
Correct.
No, so we have 130 million more that we can on top of the 40.
On top of that, right.
Yeah. What was the second part there?
When will we be able to pass another bond, and how much would that be?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, when can we pass it? That's up to you guys. But yeah, it just depends on growth, really. I mean, and how much it would depend on if we need an elementary, we need a high school, so yeah, that's a tough one. But.
And what was the population growth rate that you're assuming for the bond to not increase taxes?
So I don't know if population growth rate plays into it. I mean, for the dollar amount we're asking for, it wouldn't increase taxes. So,
The
yes.
top line right now is where, this is with our current residents, right? Not a
Right.
projected.
Yeah, there's no projected growth to that, yeah, yeah. Good.
Have you come up with an alternative plan, saying like using modular buildings if you couldn't get this bond?
So we're doing that, I mean, that's what we're doing now. Honestly, I don't feel comfortable adding more modulars, I'll be honest. I mean,
Why not?
safety, level education, cost, I mean, it's a sunken cost, it's just,
They don't last.
yeah, I mean, it's just,
My daughters both, I have two daughters over at the high school, and they both had, my one daughter had like 3 classes out there. So, one, for a couple days, they couldn't use the bathroom. It was, pipes froze, things got frozen, so they couldn't use that. And the one day, the door handle, one of the doors got broken off of the door, and the modular trailers, the doors open to the outside. And so the wind was blowing that door open. They had to use a broom to put through to keep the door closed from the wind. So anytime a kid had to leave, they had to take out the broom.
the quality of construction of those, you just can't,
Stumble
yeah,
over $1 to pick up a dollar.
Difficult
Yeah,
learning
yeah.
over there, and yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of hard.
You've been patient back, thanks.
So $80 million on top of 40 right now, right, takes us about 120 million out of 100 million that we could.
Do you know what the total is with our existing? It'd be what,
it'd be
170?
170.
170.
So in reality though, how long would it take the district to have enough to have another bond to pay for that high school that we have in Vision?
Well, it all goes back to that same thing, growth. So, yeah.
But like the projected growth, how many years would that take?
Well, the projected growth is on enrollment, not on our assessed value, and the assessed value is what drives that. Now, typically, if your enrollment's going up, your assessed value is going up, because that means more people are moving here, and supply and demand, when more people move here, things go up. But yeah, that's a little different than the enrollment. But if the enrollment necessitates another bond, as long as that mirrors, like it always has, the assessed value, then we would be able to do that, because we would build that capacity.
I think you have to think too, there's always these scenarios and what ifs and
Right.
everything, things that are in reality 100% out of your control. As a teacher who teaches here, I just know and see the need for it because there's so many students that don't have what they could have if we had space.
Yeah, and I agree with all the scenarios, like, yeah, things could go bad quickly. Doesn't change the fact that we got kids to educate.
Along with that, a lot of the comments I see online, people have, they confuse county issues with the school district. And they blame the school district for the things that county does, or the county's budget for what they think it should be devoted to the school district. The assessments on home values really bothers me. That's not a school district problem. It's not. The school district can't do anything about it. In fact, our local assessors can't do anything about it.
Right.
It's a state legislative issue, and it needs to be fixed. They recognize it. It's making
Since 2015, my assessment has gone up 289%.
So is mine.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, and I haven't sold my house once.
And I mean,
The value to me is the same as when I paid for it.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be, and that's the way the legislature recognizes things need to change.
Yeah, because
And
your
those-
same house was worth
If we all-
100,000 more than it is last year, or when the supply and demand were so.
And the fewer
How's
the
draw?
houses, the more volatile that assessment gets. If we all put our houses up for sale at the same time, housing prices would plummet.
Yeah.
Right? And the assessed values would plummet. That system is flawed. But it doesn't fix the overcrowding issues. That's the immediate need.
Right.
There's only so much money in the pot to pay for that.
If we waited.
Then you're gonna have to do something different.
If we wait until all of those things that are outside of the school district's control are fixed, that day would never happen. We'd never build another. And we continue, like I watched the population growth rates. 35% of our move-ins came from California. That's according to driver's license data, as the driver's licenses are surrendered at the transportation department. 16% of them came from Oregon, and it was like 13 or 14% came from Washington. More than half of the people are coming from high home value areas to here. And they're bringing their equity with them. And you know, I look at the economy, yeah, there's uncertainty. We always have recessions. Every 8 to 10 years there's a recession. Sometimes it goes longer than that. That's another piece of the equation that you just can't, it's not a sunk cost. It's something that you can't predict, you can't control. But what we can control is making a place for students to sit down and
No,
get
we
an
gotta keep
education.
up on it. And but like you were saying on the Taj Mahal in Utah.
Oh my gosh.
So my property tax, when I lived there 15 years ago, is still 3 times higher than what I'm paying with this.
My sister lives.
So if you want property tax, you're in the wrong state.
My sister lives in Chicago, and her house was valued at $1.6 million. That's a lot more than my house. But she pays $40,000 a year in property taxes.
Well, and when you're on a fixed budget or retired, you're talking, you know, you can talk all you want because you still have a job. A lot of us don't have jobs left. You can't subscribe
Well,
yourself.
there's only so much in the pot, and that's it.
Yeah, but guess what? Some of us probably won't even get Social Security because they've absolutely demolished. I know. I don't want to go there. I'll throw those facts in.
There's all the methods to house students. There's all the methods besides passing an $8 million bond.
Okay, go ahead.
At the school, we have 2 classes per room. There are 60 kids in a classroom.
We could do that,
Let me tell you how fun that is.
and we'll lose teachers too. Go ahead. All right, hold up. She's been very patient. Thank you.
The standard of income's a lot higher today too.
So do you receive any money from Jefferson County as part of Jefferson County's budget?
No. Not from them. No.
And do you receive money from building permits in Jefferson County?
No.
Okay.
What about federal government? You know?
Well, we receive federal funds for some federal programs, but not for facilities, no. Right.
But from the state?
Yes.
So, I could be wrong, but I feel like I remember going on, you know, we have to be more responsible with the money we're spending. I feel like we're one of the few districts in the area that doesn't have supplemental levies.
Correct.
To help fund things, because our school board has decided we want to keep the taxes as low as we possibly can by not asking for more than we actually have to have. Is that?
Yeah, so we're the largest school district in the state, and one of, I think, 10 or 12 in the state that doesn't have a supplemental levy, nor do we have a plant facility levy. Both of those would be additional taxes that almost every district has. And the plant facility goes to facilities. Supplemental levy can go to, that could go to salaries, that can go to really anything. It's general fund money. But yeah, we don't, so. Middle school to take Cairo High School numbers because we're going to take over the existing middle school campus.
Okay, and that's going
Right.
to cover the 7,400 students that you projected?
That's going to cover what we have now plus some. It just depends on where those students are. We do have some capacity at elementary level. We will have some capacity at middle school level, and we'll have some capacity at high school level. So again, it all goes back to that growth. So 7,400 students, right now we have 6,800 students. So yes, if they were scattered perfectly, we would have enough to do that. But we would be very tight at that point, and we would be talking about, now, if it's at 4% or 4.5%.
Ask for another bond for 20 years.
No, that's not what I said.
No.
Because again, if that 3% doesn't hold, and that wasn't 20 years out, that was 9 years out, I think, that we hit 74. So, Where are we at? Yeah, see, that's 74 is right in that 31, 32 range. And so it sounds a long ways out. But it's not.
The levy graph again you had, so then we're talking about 9 years out. And so you're still paying on 2 at that level.
Yeah.
And so if in that, you're gonna ask for another one. And so, like, what I don't see is a plan to reduce the total number of bars on this graph, to be honest.
Well, the only way we reduce the bars is to pay them off.
On further bonding, like, that's.
Yeah, I totally agree. That is, as we get more kids, that, as the law is now, that is what we'd have to do, is add bars, add more bonds.
That's the only way to build a school.
We don't want to build
Knows how to save up anymore?
12,000 students right now.
Right, yeah, I mean, because then you get the other end of it, you're,
2,000 within 10 years.
Right.
You know.
yeah, it wouldn't make sense to build have the buildings sitting empty until we can fill them, so, yeah.
Future growth, so Cal's
But you're exactly right, when that's the only way, and we'll be coming and having these conversations again at that point, so, yes.
The other, I watch demographic trends and things for, have for many years for work and things that I do for work. The trend now, it makes sense to do this incrementally the way you are. The trend is lower birth rates in the population. And that will alleviate some of the stress on schools proportionally going forward. And so that, it doesn't help the fact that we're one of the fastest growing counties and one of the fastest growing states in the whole country.
Right.
But move-ins too are coming in some cases, they move from areas where there's much lower birth rates than what we have.
Right.
And they bring that kind of, they bring that with them. So, and the income levels in some cases, the income levels of people that are telecommuting can sometimes be really high, much higher than what we're getting here, and they can afford higher priced houses.
Right.
And they build them here, and we benefit from those tax dollars and from their valuation. That helps pay off the school bonds faster than we would be able to if we were doing it ourselves off of the lower wage jobs that we get around Eastern Idaho. So all of those things kind of combined, I'm more optimistic that we'll be able to handle this in the future once we have to address the bond issue again down the road.
Yeah.
And for our own kids, like talking about trends in labor markets and demand for labor and livable wage jobs, those CTE opportunities that these students are going to have are huge, because they can come out of those, and there'll be shifts over time as those skill sets that are offered in those CTE programs are refined, and they move at the speed of industry, and they have industry participation in those courses, which I've seen it happen all over Eastern Idaho, that when those programs get set up correctly, those students come out of there with jobs, and they come out with good wages that are just going to keep increasing faster than the wage rates of other professionals that went off and got 6-year degrees after college.
But you're doing CTE courses now, right?
Yes, we are.
But this will enhance their ability to do that.
Right.
I mean, with that.
And expand them into other courses,
And
yeah.
having their own space, it just opens up opportunities for more and more of that kind of work. I'm sure there'd be collaborations with places like INL.
Oh, definitely.
And big major employers that really benefit those students. And give those students a chance to come back and live here instead of having to move somewhere else because they can't afford the housing.
Right, and I've already had several of those industries reach out and even want to donate to building those courses, with some in our own community and some statewide. Yeah, they're, good. You have a hand up?
Well, I grew up in South Jordan, Utah, and the high school got to 3,300 kids, and it's no bigger than this school. And so I love that you're ahead of the game. You have to be. You can't all of a sudden, like you said, it takes 2 years to get the plans and the construction going. By then, you're so far behind, it's too late on the growth.
Right. Yeah, and it's tricky. Like I get it. There's
Yeah.
what ifs all over the place, but we have to look at the facts we have now.
Bids down or design the facilities cheaper, couldn't we get that 80 million down to 70 million?
Potentially, I mean,
Accomplish the need?
when we built Cottonwood, we came in under budget a few $1 million.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, and at the high school, we came in, I mean, the track record is, yes, we come in under, because we never want to say, okay, 80 million, oh wait, never mind, it was 85, and go back. I mean, that's, we would rather come in under and then decide what to do with that.
So we always want to plan a worst case scenario, right? I'm in the building industry too, so when I quote something, it's worst case scenario, and then if we come under budget, great. Everybody's happy, they're not pissed off at me that I have to ask for more, right? And so I'm assuming the district has some built-in buffer area for unforeseen things, or, hey, we're gonna possibly bond for X amount, but hopefully we can come under. I mean, I trust these guys to be responsible. I've seen what this board and what this superintendent has built, and I trust them to be responsible with, I mean, I don't like paying taxes as much as the other guy, but I do understand that it needs to happen, and so I put my trust in their hands to
Oh, I
make.
know it needs to happen. I didn't say.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's the goal. The goal is to, and we sit down with those, you know, the contractors, the architect, in every detail we go over and they say, okay, we could do it this way or this way. Well, one, what are the pros and cons and what are the costs, and then you weigh those. So, Mr. Peak, did you?
I was just gonna, can't hear myself. When it comes to the building and how it looks, I think one thing I've noticed is that this board does try to keep that expense down to the point where we're not wasting money, kind of like what some people see in the high school now, like you were saying, weird construction things that just cost more money that weren't functional. I feel like that with the new board and Mr. Martin, that has been something they're aware of, and from my side in the school, I feel like they're always talking about that. How can we be physically responsible for what we're actually providing the students? But I think it is also important to know that the facilities that students are in, how it looks actually does play a role in how well they retain information. Being stuck in a little dark dungeon, they found that it is harder for students to retain information, to learn to progress if they don't have things like natural sunlight. So like,
Are you saying that the old high school, the metal roof is a dungeon compared to the new one?
I'm not talking about any of these buildings. All I'm saying is that what we have seen is that students do perform when the facility is a safe, comfortable place for them to be. And so that is part of that process of when we're looking at construction is, it's not just a brick and mortar building that we have to build. We also have to keep in mind the whole point of the school is to help our students learn. And we have to put things into the building that are going to be successful with that, and not just look at the cheapest way to put a structure up. Because the cheapest way to put it up may not actually facilitate learning in the most appropriate way.
Yes.
If, let's say that it did come in at like 70 million, all said and done, and we pay the rate, how many years could that take off that extra 10 million payment?
So, I don't know, Brian,
So right now, I'll just give you a little history. In 2015 and 2019, we did what's called refunding, which is refinancing the bond. With our programs we've done for the high school, some of those programs we pay 0% interest. So it'd make no sense to refund those. So right now we have refunded everything that we have. So the only recourse for the extra tax revenue would be what's called a defeasance, where we take money, we put it in an irrevocable escrow account and pay for a year. That's what we did for the Cottonwood. It was going out to 2038. We have that money set aside for that payment at a set interest rate, and it'll earn interest all through this, and then in 2038 it'll make that payment for us, which save taxes. So the only way we can do that is defease any future bonds. So we could do that each year. I think this one was like $3 million, so we could cut off 2 or 3 years potentially.
Right off the hand, or?
Yeah, it'll be off the last
Our oldest bond.
yeah, the oldest bond usually.
but then once the old bond's gone, the money's allocated to the new.
Would be the new one, right. Mhm.
Any other questions? Yes.
Is it true that the contract doesn't permit you to pay it off early? You paid off South Forks early.
So it would be the same. It's not the contract, it would be the bond. Like, yeah, it has nothing to do with like the contract with the contractor. So it would be the bond, so it would be just what Bryce
Right,
explained.
right.
You could
So we
defease it.
We refinanced it and basically cut off 4 years of that South Fork bond.
So it would be similar to that, yeah. Good. Yes.
I don't see anything about security in these buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Are you gonna have to build buildings for security?
Well, we would definitely, in the design, yes, that would be a big part of that is,
Because it's coming
yeah.
really fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely, and we, with our, when we did Cottonwood, we put money in, if you remember, for Midway and Harwood and redid their whole entryways to make them more secure and to add security that way. So yes, that would be built into the designs for sure. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, I'm more than happy to stick around and answer any individual. But again, I thank you for being here. I hope it was informative. I just encourage you to go vote tomorrow. And then we'll go from there. But thanks so much.